Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item of business is a motion on delivering an Irish language strategy. Clark, could you please read the motion?
That this Assembly acknowledges the enormous historical, cultural and social importance of the Irish language, recognises the vibrancy and growth of the language in music, education and film, commends all those who have participated in another Seacht na Gaeilge, celebrating and appreciating the vibrancy of the Irish language across our island, and calls on the Minister for Communities to deliver the long overdue Irish language strategy.
Thank you. I call on Nicola Brogan to move the motion.
Moved.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. The Business Committee has agreed to allow to 1 hour 30 minutes for this debate. The proposer of the motion will have 10 minutes to propose and 10 minutes to wind. As an amendment has been selected and is published on the Marshall list, the Business Committee has agreed that 15 minutes will be added to the total time for the debate. Nicola, could you please open the debate? Thank you.
Garmagad Laskin Corla. Da ahas ar le orm an rún seo amóla new jury and ye Seacht na Gaeilge rahula ella. Le linn an féile glacníos mó na millen denny or cuig mór part in imachtaí a Yanan Calorie or an Gaeilge. I want to congratulate and thank all of those who organised events for Seacht na Gaeilge, including those in the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area who hosted events ranging from coffee mornings, drama festivals, storytelling workshops and a special Irish language edition of the 5K Park Run. I attended a very successful Gael Talked at Home experience in the Glen Park Estate in Omagh. It was great to see a wide range of people with varying Irish abilities enjoy a weekend of Irish language classes and social activities, including yoga as Gaeilge. Cumhaile Sin and Kincurla and Shaw hosted an excellent event in the Senate Chamber to launch Seacht na Gaeilge on the 4th of March. All of these events contribute to the success of Seacht na Gaeilge Gach Blaine. Is ja scala go bhfuil fleadh ceol na hÉireann ag teach go bhfuil firste in fiche sé. Bhfuil am cohardas a dheanú le gach duine a ró bant acu leis an imacht sin a thuairt ó thuaidh. Is ceallair ionta an fleadh ar cheol, ar culture agus ar cheanga dúchas na hÉireann, agus is inti an rud a bheith a mil firste. Jan for ceallairí ar cuaig bhliana is seachtó de ceoltas. Seo an dara thur rachtal far and fleadh ila éireann a dúsceart na hÉireann. It is fantastic news that the fleadh ceol na hÉireann is coming to Belfast in 2026. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate all involved in bringing this event to the north. The fleadh is a wonderful celebration of traditional Irish music, culture and language, and it's fantastic to have it in Belfast. This will mark the 75th anniversary of Cultus and will be only the second time that the All-Ireland fleadh will be held in the north of Ireland. Events at the fleadh range from large concerts and well-known acts to street and youth performances and community ceilidhs. There will also be competitions in music, song and dance. I hope that many people take the chance to get involved with the fleadh and enjoy everything that this celebration of Irish culture has to offer. Laskin Corla, there's no doubt that the Irish language has made huge advances in recent years. The Irish language community is vibrant and thriving. Irish medium education is the fastest growing sector in education, and we're seeing more and more road signs with bilingual language. And last week the Infrastructure Minister Liz Kimmins launched a pilot scheme for traffic signs, to have traffic signs in Irish and English in the Gaeltacht quarter in West Belfast, which is very welcome development too. And Laskin Corla, with the international success of Irish language groups like NECAP and the fact that we can address the Assembly as Gaeilge Inish, it's clear that the Irish language across the north is going from strength to strength. So it does sadden me to say that the Irish language community has achieved all of this without the help of the entire executive. Earlier this month, Irish language workers went on strike for the first time in history in protest to cuts to Fóras na Gaeilge funding, cuts that caused by the DUP preventing reforms to the funding process. The Communities Minister continues to delay the introduction of an Irish language strategy that was first announced a decade ago. Last week, we members of the Committee of Communities heard evidence from Conradh na Gaeilge. The sheer frustration from these hard-working organisers and activists was palpable. We heard about how people in the sector were at their wits' end, how jobs and vital community programmes would be lost, and how those working on the co-design group are on the verge of walking out. We heard how their multiple attempts to organise a meeting with the Minister to discuss these urgent concerns have been repeatedly rejected. It's becoming more difficult for Minister Lyons to deny that a deeply concerning pattern is emerging over who he will and won't meet. Laskin Corla, the Irish language belongs to all of us. The vast majority of our place names come from Irish, and in doing so they tell us a story about our shared history. I came this morning from Tyrone, the land of Owen, to Belfast, the mouth of the Ford. This is our shared heritage, and with the right support, it can be a cultural, social and economic driver that we can all benefit from. And I hope that the Minister finds these arguments compelling and does deliver on the Irish language strategy. I move the motion and look forward to other contributions.
I call on Robbie Butler to move the amendment.
Move, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Okay. Thank you. Robbie, you will have 10 minutes to propose and 5 minutes to wind. All other speakers will have 5 minutes. Please open the debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise today to propose what I believe to be a straightforward, fair and above all inclusive amendment. This is not about taking anything away from the Irish language or questioning its significance in our society. Instead, it's about ensuring that when we talk about language strategies, we recognise the rich and diverse linguistic heritage of Northern Ireland in its entirety. We all acknowledge the deep cultural and historical importance of the Irish language. It has been spoken on this island for centuries, survived significant challenges and continues to flourish today in education, music, film and community life. That is something that is celebrated and people have every right to, but so too is the Ulster Scots language, which has helped shape our literature, our storytelling, our traditions and the very identity of many communities across this place. And that is why this amendment is necessary, Mr Deputy Speaker. It doesn't seek to remove or undermine anything in the original motion. It simply ensures that Ulster Scots receives the same level of recognition as Irish. We're not asking for special treatment for one over the other. We're asking for fairness, equal recognition and commitments to be made to both linguistic traditions and that those are honoured. And that is why what a shared and respectful society should indeed look like. And looking at some of the stats that underpin why we think this is important, since the 2011 census, there has been a widening of knowledge of both Irish language and Ulster Scots. Irish has increased by 1.7% in terms of that awareness, and Ulster Scots by 2.3%. But let's be honest, Mr Speaker, language in Northern Ireland has too often been weaponised. It's been turned into a political football by both sides, rather than being treated as a cultural asset, which it actually is. We are repeatedly told that language should not be something to fear, and I'm sure we all agree. But when language is politicised, and when phrases like "every word spoken of Irish is a bullet fired for Irish freedom" are used, it is easy to see why some people feel uneasy, and there is ground to be made up. That kind of rhetoric, which comes from the past, did nothing to promote the Irish language, nor does it make it any more accessible to people like me. In fact, it did the opposite. It created and fostered division where it didn't need to be. It fostered mistrust and alienated not just me, but some communities of those who might have otherwise embraced it much, much earlier. But let's talk about how language has been promoted. If we want communities to embrace linguistic diversity, we need to do it in a respectful and organic way. Unfortunately, what we have seen in some cases, such as in Belfast City Council, the imposition of street signs in areas where, without broad community support, it does little to encourage goodwill. Instead of bringing people along, it has driven them away. And that is the real problem, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Language should be something that unites us, not something that is forced upon communities or used to create division. Now, let me make one thing clear. My party has never been against promoting language, and I certainly haven't. And we have a proven track record of delivering on linguistic commitments. In fact, when my colleague, Michael McGimsey, was Minister for Culture, Arts and Leisure, we took the steps to support and develop the Irish language. Under his leadership, Forest na Gaeilge was established, creating a structured cross-body body to support Irish language, and it was during that time that Irish was lodged under the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages, fulfilling the commitments made under the Belfast Agreement. These were not empty gestures, they were real substantive measures taken by a minister from my own party. Since then, member groups for Irish-speaking and Ulster Scots has grown rapidly. For instance, Conrad na Gaeilge has over 200 member groups, and the Ulster Scots Community Network has over 400. There is a real appetite and interest when we look at this. But real leadership is about fairness, Mr Deputy Speaker. And fairness means recognising both of Northern Ireland's main linguistic traditions. That is why the commitments to both Irish language strategy and the Ulster Scots language strategy were made together. And that's why they must be delivered together. The Minister has said that his department is progressing key anti-poverty and disability strategies, both of which are vital and deserve our full support. But let's not forget that other important strategies, including those for Irish and Ulster Scots, gender equality and sexual orientation, remain undelivered. When it comes to languages, it is time to stop prioritising one over the other and ensure that both receive the attention and investment they deserve. In reality, Ulster Scots has as much of a place in Northern Ireland as Irish. Its contributions to poetry, music and storytelling are just as significant. And the Ulster Scots Agency continues to do fantastic work in promoting and preserving the language, and we commend them for that. But they too need proper support. That is why this amendment matters. It ensures that we are not simply paying lip service to one tradition whilst neglecting another. Surely in 2025 we're past that moment. So today I ask members across this chamber to look at this amendment in the spirit of fairness and inclusivity. This is not about diminishing Irish. It's about ensuring that Ulster Scots is treated with the same respect. It's about ensuring that language policy in Northern Ireland is built on equality and not hierarchy. It's about sending a clear message that we as an Assembly respect all traditions, not just some. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much indeed, Robbie. I call on Brian Kingston. Brian, you've up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And let me be clear at the outset, the Democratic Unionist Party believes everyone in Northern Ireland should feel comfortable expressing their national and cultural identity. This includes those who cherish the Irish language and those who cherish the Ulster Scots language, heritage and culture as part of our Indigenous cultural wealth. However, the way forward and our approach must be fair and balanced to each tradition, recognising and reflecting the delicate balance of community relations in Northern Ireland. Our United Kingdom has a rich and interwoven tapestry of language and heritage, beloved by many, and there is no reason to be fearful of other people's identities and languages. Northern Ireland is big enough to accommodate everyone, recognising that cultural and language provisions must be about facilitation rather than imposition. The development of an Irish language strategy must be brought forward in parallel with a strategy for Ulster Scots. Both of these pieces of work are cross-cutting and will require executive consideration and approval and widespread consultation. So it is that the Irish language strategy, alongside the Ulster Scots language, heritage and culture strategy, is being developed through a co-design process in which the Department for Communities is taking the lead on behalf of the Executive. The DUP indicated in 2017 that we could not support legislation for Irish on a basis that would elevate the Irish language above English or reduce career opportunities for those who did not speak Irish. The same principles must apply to any strategy that is brought forward. We regret that the Sinn Féin motion limits its aspect to just the Irish language, and we welcome the Ulster Unionist Party amendment, which is more balanced and inclusive and recognising the Ulster Scots aspect also. Burdens placed on public authorities must respect language services to be fair and proportionate. The most recent census results demonstrate that the majority of people in Northern Ireland, as we all know, use English as their main language. This is followed by those who use Polish and then Lithuanian. In the Northern Ireland census of 2021, 12.4% of respondents reported some level of ability in Irish, around 229,000 people, and 10.4% of respondents, around 191,000 people, reported some ability in Ulster Scots. So reasonableness must be a key consideration in terms of future actions and obligations underpinning language and cultural strategies, given the unprecedented pressures facing our public services. As has been mentioned at committee last week, we received a delegation from Conrad na Gaeilge. I raised at that meeting the policies regarding dual language street signs been raised at local councils. And in particular, what has happened in Belfast, where a long-standing policy of allowing a dual-language street sign, most often in Irish, where a majority of residents wish to have it, that was been radically changed in recent years by nationalist parties and the Alliance Party to reduce the threshold down to a ridiculously low 15%. This has caused dissent within areas which are quietly mixed, where residents get on together, and has now caused tensions. And just 2 weeks ago at committee, in my constituency of North Belfast, we had 2 streets. When the survey was done, the majority of residents did not consent to having an Irish street sign added. In Sunningdale Park North, 22% were for an Irish street sign, 33% were against. And in Ben Madigan Park South, 23% were for the Irish street sign, 26% were against. But in both of those cases, nationalist councillors pushed the matter through at committee. That level of threshold is clearly undemocratic, it's unfair, and it needs to be changed. It is disrespecting the views of residents who view it as cultural branding of their area. It is also... I'll give way briefly, yes.
I thank the member for giving way on a very crucial point, and would he agree with me that this is not only happening in councils like Belfast, but also in other councils across Northern Ireland, where the advancement of such cultural supremacy is indeed causing worry and angst among those who are legitimately concerned?
And regrettably, the member has now run out of time.
They're not getting an extra minute?
No, you're not getting an extra minute.
I will not be speaking in Irish because my Irish is confined at the moment to telling my sons to put on their shoes and ask them where their school bags and their school jumpers are, and I don't think that the Chamber needs that. But firstly, I would like to thank the members for bringing this motion to the floor today. It is an issue that I'm really passionate about. I do believe that the Irish language is for everyone, and it's not something that should be feared or seen as a tool to divide. And I find it really regretful that in the past there has been attempts to use it as a weapon rather than a gift. This strategy would offer the choice to all communities, or should I say to this would all communities, or should I say our community as a whole. It is embracing a language, should you choose to, that could belong to everyone. A strategy like this has the potential to not only preserve and promote the Irish language, but also to support the rights of vulnerable communities, minority languages, to open the doors further to bilingual education, and to enhance the social, cultural and economic opportunities for all. The impact can be far-reaching and provide benefits not just to the Irish-speaking community, but to the wider society. I want to focus for a moment on our young people, as I am the party spokesperson for children and young people, and I have seen firsthand the many benefits that bilingualism brings to children. I see the positive impact on academic performance, cognitive skills and cultural awareness by having an immersive second language. And those advantages are not just limited to the Irish language education alone. Being bilingual in any language offers tremendous benefits to children, particularly in brain development. Bilingualism is a cognitive powerhouse. Studies have shown that bilingual children have stronger problem-solving skills, better multitasking abilities and enhanced memory. And from my own house, I can attest to that. They excel academically and demonstrate greater creativity. For children, regardless of their background, bilingual education is more about learning a language. It's an immersion in a vibrant culture where they gain a deep understanding of history, music, literature and identity. In today's globalised world, languages are a valuable currency, and attending an Irish medium school can foster a child's interest in learning Irish, but also inspire a broader desire to learn other languages, especially as those pathways are built in the brain. The need for an Irish language strategy has never been more pressing. A strategy that not only protects and promotes the language, but also supports the right of a minority language. We need to be clear about this. This is not just a nice to have, this is a legal commitment underpinned by various agreements and solidified by the Identity and Language Northern Ireland Act 2022, enshrined it in law, introducing statutory protections and mandating for the creation of this strategy. It is an embarrassment that we're now seeing the instigation of yet another legal challenge to the Department regarding the lack of implementation. And to be honest, from the Gaelgorey that I have spoken to recently, there is a hurt, there's an anger and there's a profound sense of frustration that their language and cultures haven't been dragged through the courts rather than being celebrated through this chamber. By providing a framework for the Irish language, we will be making an explicit commitment to ensure the rights of Irish speakers in our shared community. This strategy should provide not only in terms of language, but also in ensuring equal access to education, employment and the cultural resources for all, especially those from vulnerable or marginalised communities. And the concerns raised by Conradh na Gaeilge about the development or lack thereof of this strategy are not to be taken lightly. They highlight that despite years of discussion, hours and hours of meetings and contribution, there is still no clear actionable plan and not even a draft strategy on the table. Yes, of course.
I thank the member for giving way. During the Committee for Communities last week, we heard from Conradh na Gaeilge to say that the strategy was there, it was almost ready, it just needed to be signed off. Do you agree with me then that the barriers that are being put in place in the progress should not have to end up in court, but should actually just get on with it? Yeah.
I think that's a very succinct way
And
to
the
say
member
it.
has an extra minute.
Thank you. Just get on with it. Quite like that. That's directed at you, Minister, just in case you didn't realise that. We have seen the apologies. I was just amplifying my colleagues' succinct sentiment. We've seen the positive example of language strategies in other countries. In Wales, the government implemented that long-term strategy to protect and promote Welsh language, 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050, with measurable targets for language acquisition and use. The Irish language strategy must be similarly ambitious, with clear goals for increasing the number of Irish speakers. In terms of the amendment from the UP, we will support it, and I do appreciate the words from the member. I think that has definitely reassured me that it wasn't a case of, well, if we're talking about the Irish language, then we must talk about Ulster Scots, because I think that at times there is a little bit of that, and I think it's very degenerative and can actually feed into the politicisation of the language. So I'm relieved to hear from the comments of the member. So I urge the Minister for Communities to take immediate action, deliver the long overdue Irish language strategy, and let it not be the case that he's the Minister presiding over the department that is found wanting a third time by the courts in terms of bringing forward the strategy to the executive. Much like music, which is often said to be the language of our soul, language serves as a bridge to connect our minds, share ideas and express our identities. And while the Irish language may be seen by some in our community as a source of division, I would argue that it could be, in fact, a powerful tool for fostering deeper connections with one another.
Thank you very much, Richard. And I call on Patsy McClone.
Good last gun Corlia. Goya wine current sa falter of an rune at Taronia new. Ach goy ella ashtiach galore ta strategisch foger Hanafian a clar iltish and Imanish. Kebbi takim sa lesion rune, I guess takim lesion lasu fosta. Ach noia is she tastil na putjaga, a hicha. Corrigas forus ella eran arjanga. Forus na gilliga. Cowenu an orish. Ta iltis na heran tilchinach a godjaik. Feminist na vocal jazz. Bailefekel. Kebir be pilgrimage strategisch agus na tosiachti. Ver heen eigentus ofigul agus cardli, bechor gelanhien strategische rei leis na forlacha, a tugos jaffi act eigentus agus changa tuisgereren. A hug status ofigul don changa, bechor genefrahi shaw, Capo Commissioner Changa Gilga, Bonu ofig eigentus agus leru culture on Tonskada, Changa a Wirshu agus Corhon Kin. Educus agus Eluinch Muncheri, Taga Lilatnu na Scolana Lan Gielaga. Bachor Gunyanfi and Stratish Naniha Shalanas. Tackle the Forbert Brescia na Gael Scolana, Erna Gael Scolana, Curla Clar Elunue, Muncheri Hon Frastel, Elu Medica, Educus Tri Gaelga. Forbert Cheriana, Gael Colleski, Ganter nos welvaarste hui, Cargara, Irherloon, Agus Noy, and Mecanter se hier in Larolly. The cash for the wine nugums done Imana session, and will Faharby now will in Louis and Gil Scoliacht and Staklar Ibra at the Fogerha Akushu, done Imanas. an príomhfrontiala na man agus corhan cin na cultar. Begor go gurfi an stratéis agus tarins na gilge tríd na ihe seo lanawinch. Taco le crealtoracht, letria, ceol agus imachtaí cultartha gilge. Sprago hon toirtear déliantóirí agus do grúpa a úsid an gilig mar chud da gultar agus da glachtéis cruchiacht. Servicey pobl agus cohariacht, bachor go gurfi an stratéis bem solachar servicey pobl tríd gilige, cruchiacht da hangach gantar in a bhfuil rachar den gilig, astru glícha tábhachtacha go gilige, mar a bhil an cólia Yorpach. Tá ról tábhachtach ag an aimimenas a lig an a leith siúd. Ran fartiach pobl agus taciach, bagor go gurfi bem orbert na gilige level pobl trí onid pobl a bhainú le haid rangan na gilige agus imachtaí sóisialta. Líonraí gilige mar hampla in iarthar bhfuil fearste agus I cearn tochar a orbert agus a chochu. Agus a cinnte a chara.
Goma les gil tá mé as cleachtú agus tá méarag má thuid Gaeilge. An sílan tú go gcurann seachtain na Gaeilge go mór le haithhantas an Gaeilge.
And the member has an extra minute.
Ag an fointe seo mollamsa go hard ofiig an ceann cóilíonn seo as ucht an méid ólais a tugu dúine trasna an sin an ólais agus an educais a tugu dúin in sa nócaid a bhío ag an ceann cóile. Maidir leis an teanga Gaeilge agus ar nua leis an Gaelic. Bhí sé sin infrideach le féineach. Sa deireadh hir hall bhailam sa cóhéic splitiúil agus cultartha agus na pointí seo tá an tábhachtach fásta. Tá sé tábhachtach de gurfií an Gaeilge chun cin ar bhealacha tá ilcomsicha agus másúil ar an éagsúla cultartha a tuaisceart éireann. Ba chóir go mbeidh an stratéis dírithe ar chóchéis cinnt agus ar chaidirh mai idir na pobl éagsúla. Tá sé sin bar tábhachtach sa chuachas go mbeidh tuiscint teogaine ar a chéile. Agus is tábhachtaí fós caithí an aimimenas tús a chur leis an stratéis. Mas spíor iad da gapéis chéan. Gur míle agad a las ceann cóile.
Thank you, Patsy. And I call on Emma Sheeran.
Las ceann cóile. Dús bhhailm a rá gur haith mé an deireadh seachtaine in í dóir. Áit in a bhhar ar deanga guthas agus atá beo baithe agus láidir in dhá eile áit sa ceantar. And when you leave a Gaeltacht region, you think to yourself, why can we not have that everywhere? The vibrancy of the language, the visibility of the language, it's a living, breathing thing in the places where the language was maintained, where they couldn't wipe out our language. And I have to say, I was in several restaurants and pubs and supermarkets and other places over the course of the weekend, and I seen signage as Gaelic everywhere, and I didn't see anyone running away or scared or terrified of the language. It's open to everyone. It belongs to us all, and it should be that way. And being in Tír a place that is close to my heart, being half Donegal and half Tyrone, and my own great-grandmother was one of the last native speakers in an area where the language was subsequently wiped out. I feel very, very strongly about this because I was in Donegal at the weekend with a group from my area, a group of Irish language learners attending classes organised through Glór na Spéireanna. And the work that has been done there is fantastic across, as the previous speaker mentioned, across all areas of Mid-Ulster. We have got Irish language groups in Carrantahar, in Marharfelta, Glór na Spéireanna, and my own Ballinscreen. And the message that I get from the people who are working on the ground to revitalise our native language is the same. It is that the work they are doing is so important and it's brilliant, but they want to do more. And they're not receiving the support that they need. And we all know what gets measured gets done, and that's why a strategy is so important. It is required to provide those objectives, to provide those working remits that allow people to see how well things are being delivered upon. The language is open to everyone, and the joy that you get from it being amongst people speaking in such a it has meaning in our area, as previously articulated. All our places, the names that we use every day, come from the Irish language, and when you make that connection, it's like a light bulb going off. And I feel very strongly that the people who are doing that vital work on the ground and doing the campaigning that has taken us so far in terms of the Gaelic revival need to see the support delivered upon them. So I think it's important that people support this motion. Gormila Mahagav.
Thank you, Emma. I call on Maurice Bradley.
Mr. Speaker, our rich cultural and linguistic heritage here in Northern Ireland deserves both respect and balance. Many have a couple of focal in the Irish language and a wheen of words in Ulster Scots traditions. Both are vibrant aspects of our society, flourishing in music, dance, education and media. Ulster Scots is widely spoken in the areas that both the Minister and I represent, and also throughout North Antrim. Wouldn't it be great to see Ulster Scots incorporated in the Gaeltacht? However, we support the promotion of both languages, but this must be done in a way that is fair, practical and does not place undue burdens on public services or finances. The appointment process for language commissioners and the Office of Identity and Cultural Expression is underway. Following proper public appointment procedures, these officers will play a key role in shaping future policy, and we must ensure their work is rooted in fairness, not political advantage or disadvantage. However, there remains a stark disparity in broadcasting funding. 61.4 million has been allocated to the Irish Language Broadcast Fund since 2004, compared to just 14.1 million for the Ulster Scots. This is an equality issue and an imbalance that must be addressed. Our party respects those who cherish the Irish language, but language policies must be reasonable, proportionate and fair to all communities. Irish and Ulster Scots have similar levels of use, yet Irish receives far greater financial support, and that must be addressed under equality. It is also crucial that strategies for Irish and Ulster Scots are developed in tandem. No single tradition should be elevated above another or relegated below another. As our ministers engage internationally, we continue to highlight the immense contribution of Ulster Scots heritage, particularly in the United States. Ulster Scots migrants helped shape American history, and their language deserves recognition on equal terms. Ultimately, we must ensure that any future language policies command broad support, respect diversity and uphold fairness. The days of one language receiving preferential treatment over another should be ended. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Maurice. I call on Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm fluent in Ulster Scots. I was very fortunate to grow up in an area where Ullans speak all the time. My grandmother probably was the most fluent person I've ever heard, and you didn't want to get in the wrong side of her. But today, we can all accept that the historical, cultural and social significance of the Irish language and Ulster Scots, we can accept that, the strength of that across all of our community. The Irish language, or Gaeilge, and Ulster Scots are more than a means of communication. They are living evidence to our shared heritage and identity. In recent years, we have witnessed a remarkable resurgence of both languages across various cultural domains, including music, film, radio, television, festivals and events and sports. I commend all the participants of Sac na Gaeilge, a festival that annually celebrates and promotes the Irish language across our island. This event fosters unity and pride, encouraging both fluent speakers and novices to engage with the language in meaningful ways. And my thanks to Conrad na Gaeilge for their presentation to the Committee for Communities in Irish, but it highlighted also the frustrations that they have that there is a lack of movement on the Irish language strategy. Mr. Speaker, despite these cultural advancements, there still remains a pressing need for a formal support through a comprehensive Irish language strategy. The New Decade New Approach Agreement explicitly mandates the development of such a strategy to enhance and protect the Irish language. The British Irish Parliamentary Assembly, BIPA, in their report Provision for Indigenous Minority Languages in the BIPA jurisdiction, said, too often in these islands, language has been a source of division, but in underlining the shared experiences of Indigenous minority languages, their report sought to demonstrate how they bind our communities. In the same report, BIPA confirms Irish received official recognition in Northern Ireland for the first time in 1998 under the Good Friday Agreement, and like Ulster Scots has since 2022 been an official language in Northern Ireland. It's disappointing to read in that report that BIPA state protection for Irish language in Northern Ireland stems largely from the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages, when that's something that we should be doing here. Turning to Ulster Scots, the 1999 Northern Ireland Life and Times survey found that 2% of Northern Ireland residents said they could speak Ulster Scots or Ullans, which would mean a total speech community of approximately 30,000. Most of them probably live in Ballymena, along that Northern Irish coast heading towards Scotland and the Ards Peninsula. Other estimates range from 35,000 in Northern Ireland to a total of 100,000 in Ireland, mainly the east coast of Donegal, where half my family is from. Mr Speaker, it's frustrating to me that the Identity and Language Northern Ireland Act 2022 had to be passed by the Westminster Parliament after attempts to pass similar legislation in Stormont encountered political difficulties due to disagreements over the status of Irish and Ulster Scots. Regrettably, and to put it kindly, progress has been sluggish. That's very kind, I have to say. The Northern Ireland Executive has faced and continues to face legal challenges due to its failure to implement this strategy, highlighting the urgency for the need for us to affirm our commitment here in the House today. In conclusion, the Irish language and Ulster Scots provide a vibrant thread woven into the fabric of our society. Its resurgence in music, film and education is testament to its enduring relevance. However, to truly honour and preserve this integral aspect of our heritage, we must move beyond celebration and take concrete action. And I urge the Minister for Communities to expedite the delivery of the long overdue Irish language strategy, fulfilling our collective responsibility to protect and promote Gaeilge for the current and future generations. There is no excuse to continue to fail to deliver or to delay on any language strategies. Let's stop politicising Irish language and Ulster Scots. Let's get on with delivery together. Not progressing means a failure of this executive to meet legal requirements, and it says more about the ability of this Assembly to recognise and celebrate the wealth of our shared culture. Grema Agat and Mayor thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. I call on Militia McHugh.
Lascan Corla, Scalon Jesh, a very Ogum Lord an Ruin Shaw. August Yeri an Ira Fop Stadish Gaeilge Cor a Viam Free Jerry here have. Hullamudge, I can catch the Fobble and Shackness of Catcha on Dima, a tire Henry na Gaeilge, Gold Stadish Gaeilge go foil Gandianu, August Naquillan, tire Sasta Bulla Law, na Amlin a Hort Marger. The Stradish Gaeilge. As our Jima Lum Chin, no Desh me leis an Ira Legini agus egg torch as Jack, Recteoch, Major leis an Villa Changa Koreachta, Valier, Gor Hagshe, and Tauta a Wanan La Changa, La Culture Changa, agus an Chonahur, a Ta ag Changa an Tohe a Gutchanta Ohi, Kohananas Jeshanata. Rashinda, Curm and Kecht. Cathy at Lakenshire and Urdshin Ama, the Stadish Gaeilge a Albert. Tashi the Ulgus an Irish Stadish Gaeilge a Orchard as Jack. Stadish then a lager a Mac go Sillier Sprickena a Dackle the Dulcan Kin August Forwards na Gaeilge Kion Fiha Blaine. August Lana Genofer go me Muinu Ki an leis an Stadish a Cor Con Viam. I'd name and Dulcan Kin a Ranu Fui Commissioner Changa a Tala Capel, August Recteocta a Rihu a Parliament na Bratan a Daga leis an Ac Fanuliocta August Changa, August as an Irishin a Ta Frostrahas Augum. Walmudge go foil ag Fanag Sad Lynch Shaw la Stadish Gaeilge. Stadish leis an Bala Con Kin a lagan amach the Fobble na Gaeilge atá ag fas a méid agus a mrí a rí a náma. ta a Harris agam fui na constake a malak fobble na Gaeilge fui lahar. Go hairha the scontake a happen on fast. The hairwine goal Gerga la tellu muntri ulcha a gach hour la frastal an elu ata ons na Gael scolana ac ana hantaha shin tagala muntri a wal Gaelge agus ata ulcha go level a cuig a curm liani the rare an elev an achna race scolana tri man na Gaelge. Yanni shan keshna mar shin a horse consolas a richok le stradish Gaelge. A stilly Jerry Aintus a Yanni de fast na Gaelge. Ni hewain a mask na nene a wall an changa oka kena fein ac a mask an phobal a gotchinta ata ag true lesson changa a olum. Ta nismo dine a glaco lesson changa go hairaha an winter oga a iron spragu an doe a wall ag iri le grupa oga ard ernia nos kneecap no ladine Ellis the scalan Gaelge. A sayin Gaelge changa yuchis na cheer shot agus yoga tashi kion dan na changa a sinya doan tashi har temple ording an anmerka na conde na balti faran na balti mora agus na kahara agin an te a wal Gaelge aga ta koramak aga na loganiraka agus na canter a Yanni Sheikh Hone on. Wanan changa lesson commerceage on Tuskins, on mass, on culture, agus on Greece. Ni hegam marshin, kati a wohi dinye a vi fui vagart agin Gaelge. Us an Irishin ba cart stadish Gaelge a veon, lesson lam party agus spragu. Cadre pobl agus Tuskins an pobl a chachu agus deisna a cor file do gach daine. Go mille mágatsa.
Thank you. Call on Timothy Gaston.
Deputy Speaker, I will be opposing both the motion and the amendment before us. I will be doing so in the knowledge that my words and actions in this House today have the support of the Unionist community, not just in North Antrim, but right across Northern Ireland. I say that so confidently because of polling commissioned by Analogical Research, a not-for-profit initiative. I am grateful to Analogical Research for permission to share the findings with members today. The polling conducted by Lucid Talk was carried out just last month and sought to establish if there was a chill factor among Unionists and Protestants when Irish language and Irish language is erected. Unlike much of the polling on this issue, the questions asked were simple and straightforward, designed not to get answers which could be spun, but to get to the truth. It had a representative sample of 1,050 people. The first question asked about people's reaction if the local council put up Irish language street signs in the road where they lived. Respondents were asked if that would make them more likely to move, less likely to move, or whether it would make no difference. Some 71% of those who voted for a Unionist party and 63% of those who identified as Protestant said that it would make them more likely to move. For the TUV voters, the figure was 84%, DUP 71%, and UUP 57%. The second question asked respondents if a road had Irish language street signs, would that make them more likely to move there, less likely to move there, or would it make no difference? 88% of Unionist voters and 82% of Protestants said they were less likely to move there. The responses from different Unionist party supporters were very similar. The DUP 89%, TUV 86%, and Ulster Unionists 84%. The third question related to council-run leisure centres. People were asked if their leisure centre had Irish signage, would it make them more or less likely to use the facility, or would it make no difference? Some 75% of Unionists and 69% of Protestants said the Irish signage would make them less likely to use the leisure centre. The reality is that while the Irish language is appreciated and celebrated by some, it has a significant chill factor for many in our society. Forcing it in areas, as has happened in Belfast and will doubtless happen more widely now that the DUP have agreed to set the wheels in motion of the appointment of an Irish Language Commissioner, is regressive and will result in a more polarised society. People who do not regard Irish as part of their culture, such as myself and the people I represent, have no difficulty with the language being cherished by those who appreciate it. Equally, resisting its aggressive promotion in places where it is not wanted does not make them bigots. The truth is that Irish can be and is used as a cultural weapon, which will result in a more divided society and polarised society. Lots of people pushing this will like to talk about equality, but the truth is that when it comes to equality for the Irish language, it's the Gerry Adams version of equality many aspire to. Apologies for the unparliamentary language, but I think it's important to quote Mr. Adams accurately in this. The point is to actually break these bastards. That's the point. And what's going to break them is equality. That's what's going to break them. Equality. Who could be afraid of equality? Who could be afraid of treating someone the way you want to be treated? That's what we need to keep the focus on. And that's the Trojan horse of this entire Republican strategy. This motion is a Trojan horse motion. The amendment is wrong-headed as it carries all the hallmarks of those taken in by the Trojan horse. The commitment in the programme for government to develop a strategy is wrong and should never have been made. The Irish language community have Sinn Féin to thank for it being a chill factor to unionism.
Thank you, Mr. Gasson. I call on Jerry Carroll.
Is muin changa and Gaelic, Taya rud yi orhi, Kjarta agus Aquani, Ta pobl na Gaelic ag fwas, Ta lean na Dini oga ata or Gaelskolana ag fwas, Ta lean na Dini fasta ag folum na Gaelic ag fwas, agus ta muinu agus takiak Kjart yi an phobl shin. Tá muinu agus an takeíocht sin tuailte ag an phobal sin. I má cantar hain tá serviceí im bhfuil, tá múnteirí faoi bhrú, agus tá scoil an Gaelscoil an Lonam. Atá ag foirniú ceart go fáil. Mar sin de, tá sé ionach táhaachta ar fearr go cuireann stormant strateis na Gaelic a bhain. Strateis a cuireann Aquani Kjarta ar ail don teanga. Tá sé bheith chur mul ar foioi a bhuair ruada. Go minic dearna páirtithe móra nach bhfuil go leor airgid an. Agus sprág é sin thug sibh na milliún do invest in ar na málamh. Cé go bhfuil scéal an faoi airgid invest in be a úsáid le Headland Israel a Yeshu. So cur star leis na le skelti, cur star leis an flaunas, cur a vine agus mini strategus na Gaelic anish. Merla anish, Deputy Speaker. I think for too long the Irish medium education sector has been too reliant on goodwill, unsustainable ad hoc funding. Corley and the Gaelscoil Acta completed an audit of progress in the review of Irish medium education recently, and they found that since 2008, zero progress has been made on a quarter of the recommendations made in the review of the Irish medium education, and that's absolutely no progress at all in the span of 17 years on accommodation issues, support for special education needs, informal learning through Irish and Irish language support for children at home. Areas of particular concern, Deputy Speaker, also include staff training in the Irish medium sector. Education workers report that DE and the EA don't understand the challenges associated with immersive education in a target language. Institutional inertia, as many have described it, is failing the needs of Irish medium education and its learners. And a well-resourced Irish medium education strategy should also be a priority for the Education Minister, and I would urge him to get on with it.
Thank you. And I call on the Minister. Minister, you have up to 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. For any place, language, the way things are spoken about, which in turn can influence how things are thought about, is a central element to that place and to its peoples. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's important that we respect each other, and that means respecting each other's culture, heritage and languages. The work, however, is not straightforward. We've heard this morning that the journey towards strategies has been a long one, and I can only speak as Minister about the most recent year of that journey, whilst being conscious of the years preceding that. There are clearly challenges in relation to costs and funding. There are many calls on our public finances and decisions to be made, many centred around how we prioritise spend. It's clear that the many components of our heritage, culture and creativity can improve personal and community well-being, can improve community cohesion, can reduce recidivism and can improve skills. It's therefore important that we seek to find funding for these activities, and I very much include language in this space, as language is a key component of our wider heritage and culture. However, we must remember that finances are limited. Not everything that we aspire to do is possible. Not everything that can make a positive difference can be funded. But language can enrich our communities, our learning, our media and publications, our cultural lives and our economy. It can also be used as a tool to divide. And there's much talk about rights to speak in a certain language, rights to be able to celebrate a certain language. But that needs to continue to be set against the rights of all to choose not to use or connect with a particular language as well. And it is in this context that the Executive's Ulster Scots Language, Heritage and Culture Strategy and Action Plan and Irish Language Strategy and Action Plan are being developed. As we have heard, this development has moved through a number of phases. Expert advisory panels provided recommendations in 2022 on what the strategy should seek to address. Co-design groups of stakeholders were brought together in October 21 to provide input on the development and content of the strategies and action plans. And the co-design groups are chaired by a sectoral stakeholder and a senior official in my department. So I'm grateful for all of the work that has been undertaken and all of the knowledge and expertise that has been shared through the work of the co-design groups. And I am grateful to each member of the two co-design groups. They focused strongly in 2022 and 2023 on action plans to implement strategies. These were ambitious, not just in terms of costs, but also in terms of the people and resources required, in terms of the skills development needed, and in some cases, in terms of the necessary technology. In 2024, the group's focus was more on the draft narrative strategies, and in October 2024, the co-design groups completed their drafting work on the two narrative strategies. The outputs from this phase of the work of the co-design groups were then passed to my department for consideration. A key element of this consideration needs to be the achievability of proposed actions and how they fit with broader departmental and executive priorities, with work already underway. It may be, for instance, that work is already underway in a department which will deliver the intent of an action but via a different route. The next stage of work is central to the role of the cross-departmental working group of senior officials. This group first met in February 2022 and has to date largely been operating in shadow mode, tracking the work of the co-design groups. With the delivery of the co-design group's draft documents, the CDWG is able to move out of shadow mode. The group has met roughly every 6 weeks over the last year and has spent some time considering its approach. And I intend to bring imminently a paper to the Executive asking my colleagues to confirm or amend their department's member of the group and give that member authority to engage across their department to consider and agree appropriate actions, including developing costs. After this phase of work, which given the range of potential action areas and other work going on across departments will take a few months, I will be in a position to consider draft strategies and action plans for bringing to the executive for approval of public consultation. As members will appreciate, there will be further necessary stages following that consultation, consideration of the comments and potential amendment to the documents in light of these comments, and then approval by the executive of final drafts for publication. I should also touch on the concept of co-design. It's absolutely right that the government take full account of the views and expertise of those across our society. It is, however, for government to govern. Therefore, I am grateful for all of the work done and time committed by every member of the two co-design groups. This has allowed us a basis to move to the next stage of the work, which is for us. Nonetheless, I have committed, and I reaffirm today, that the co-design groups will have a chance to review and comment on the draft documents before they move to public consultation, and that I will, at that stage, meet with the co-design groups. My reasoning for not meeting at an earlier stage has been that I would not have had proposals to discuss with the co-design group members. And I think at this stage it's appropriate for me to address some of the disingenuous comments that have been made by the chairperson of the Communities Committee and have been reinforced by the Deputy Chair today. He has claimed that I have refused to meet Conradh na Gaeilge, and that is not the case. Conradh na Gaeilge have had extensive input into the decision-making process, and I have committed to meeting with them when the next stage of work is done. The Chair knows this. I have explained that to him. He has been briefed on this, but he continues to peddle the line that I am not acknowledging the contribution made by these groups. That is not true. I am following a process. I know what he is up to. I know what he is trying to do, but I have committed to a certain action, and I will give me a second. I have committed to a line of work, and I'm going to do that, and I'm happy to give way to him so he can clarify his comments.
Thank the Minister, yeah, and the Minister will, I'm sure, recognise that Conradh na Gaeilge have existed for well over 100 years, represent a huge community, and wish to speak to you about many issues, including the development of the strategy, but other issues which you have made no attempt to engage with them on at all, thereby showing a lack of regard for the work they do.
Well, my understanding is that they have been in contact to discuss this work. If there are separate issues that they want to raise, I am happy to discuss those. However, I have put in place a process which the member is well aware of, because it's exactly the same process that I have put in for the other key strategies, including the anti-poverty strategy, which he continues to call to be published, even though I have already committed to ensuring that that goes to the executive by the end of this month. I will give way to him again.
So the Minister will recognise, and I agree, that you have set out a process. What I have said, and what I believe other committee members have said, is that that process is not giving proper recognition to the groups who have put in so much effort to assisting your department with working on these strategies, including under the previous Minister, and significantly drafting strategies which they are now seeking to reiterate and have further input on.
And in all of these strategies, they have had incredible input, because the way in which these were set up by my predecessor had given them the access and the information that they needed in order to co-design that with us. We are going through a process now with the various strategies, with the cross-departmental groups, and he is aware of those. He may disagree with that, but he is well aware of the process that I have put in place. He may disagree with that, but I believe that he's being disingenuous in the way in which he is presenting it, and I will be calling that out. So I hope that that makes clear the processes that I have been following, and I say again, they are the same for the language strategies as for the social inclusion strategies. I recognise that the work of the cross-departmental working groups is to review, assess and critically evaluate the inputs from the co-design groups. That's taking time. I know that's frustrating the co-design group members and others, but it is a vital stage of ensuring that we have strategies that address the issues, that are deliverable and will not create problems of division. So I'm bringing my remarks to a close, and having explained the process of developing the strategies and the current stage in that process, I want to return to the important role that language plays in the life of Northern Ireland and of each of us. I've stated on numerous occasions in this chamber and to the committee that I fully respect the rights of people in regard to their cultural and linguistic heritage. It is, however, vital that we balance those benefits with the costs and impositions that might involve. And it is on this basis that I will manage the process that now moves into the cross-departmental working group stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The Business Committee has arranged to meet at 1300 today. I propose, therefore, by leave of the Assembly to suspend the sitting until 1400. The debate will continue after question time, when the next member to be called will be Doug Beattie to wind on the amendment. The sitting is, by leave, suspended. Thank you.
Assembly Chamber. Sound. 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 Assembly Chamber. Sound.
Sitting is resumed. Questions to the Executive. Stephen Dunn.
One, Mr. Speaker.
First Minister.
We welcome the publication of this report on the 6th of March. It provides important data on areas that are key to the well-being of our population, such as loneliness, levels of happiness and anxiety, and whether or not people think the things that they do are worthwhile. Overall, higher life satisfaction and worthwhile scores indicate an improvement in individual well-being compared with previous figures. 34% of people reported very high levels of life satisfaction, 37% of people reported very high levels of happiness, and 42% reported very high levels of feeling that the things they do are worthwhile. 66% of people reported very low or low levels of anxiety, and there was a significant decrease in the number of people who reported feeling lonely at least some of the time. However, not everyone in our society experiences the same levels of well-being. People who reported their health as very good reported better levels of well-being than those that reported their health as bad or very bad. And people with a disability reported lower levels of well-being than those without a disability. People living in the most deprived areas reported the lowest levels of individual well-being compared with all other areas. And people in employment reported better levels of well-being than those not in employment. Our programme for government highlights our commitment to working together to improve the well-being of everyone who lives and works here.
Mr Dunn. Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank the First Minister for her answer. Can I ask the First Minister how information included in reports such as these will be used to track progress against the programme for government in tackling issues such as anxiety and loneliness, which, as outlined in this report, do remain alarmingly high right across Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, when you reflect on the report, there's been some improvements, but some areas where we just need to keep a very close, full eye. And I think the programme for government measurements are wellbeing indicators, which will be used to sort of chart our advances and our progresses across all of these areas. The fact that it's going to be continuously updated will give us a chance to actually see where we are making progress, and certainly, perhaps even more importantly, let us see where we're not making progress and where people's outcomes haven't improved. There are 51 indicators in total, and all of these are updated at various points throughout the year in line with their source of publications, so they all come from different sources. But we will continue to update those on an ongoing basis. And to give you an example, data for indicators on life satisfaction, self-efficacy and loneliness were published as part of the individual wellbeing report on the 6th of March, and then the wellbeing framework was updated to include those indicators just 5 days later on the 11th of March. So that gives you a sense of just how in real play and real time these things can be updated.
Dennis.
And I thank the First Minister for her answers. Does the First Minister agree that the programme for government is a key statement of intent from the Executive to work together to improve people's lives?
Mr.
Yes, I certainly do. It is our effort together to work together to share an ambitious programme for the Executive. The PFG itself has been designed to make things better, to improve people's lives, to improve their lot, to do better in areas of health and tackling waiting lists, our environment, on childcare, on growing a globally competitive economy, providing more social and affordable homes and sustainable homes, building safer communities, ending violence against women and girls, and much more. But that's going to require a collective focus and sustained commitment if we're going to deliver the real and positive differences to people's lives here. And that's what I believe we're all ultimately here to do. There will, of course, be tough challenges ahead, financial challenges ahead, but sure, we know all of that also. But we can, and indeed we must, make a real difference to improving people's lives, and that's why our focus is now all about delivery. And for my part, I want to continue to work with all around the Chamber and across our Executive to deliver the positive change that people want to see on the issues that matter most to them and their families.
Buchanan. Question 2, please.
As part of our commitment to supporting victims and survivors, we have ensured that the funding for VSS has consistently been protected from cuts. We continue to keep the level of funding under review. This financial year we have provided over £21 million to VSS to ensure continued help and support for victims and survivors of the conflict, historical institutional abuse, mother and baby institutions and Magdalen laundries and workhouses. Support is also provided for those that are assessing the Victims Payment Scheme. VSS provides funding to community groups here to deliver essential support and services to victims and survivors. In addition, this year over 6,000 people have been supported through self-directed assistance payments alone. It is the lead partner of the €25 million Peace Plus programme, which aims to improve the health and well-being of victims and survivors by increasing access to high-quality trauma-informed services. VSS is now engaged with our officials in preparation for a new victim support programme from April 2026. This programme will allow support and services provided by VSS and its community partner organisations to continue, and also it will play a vital role in achieving the outcomes outlined in the Victims and Survivors Strategy.
Buchanan. Thank you, and thanks for your answer so far. First Minister, what is your assessment of how the fund is distributed to the relevant groups, and how is it assessed based on their outputs?
Well, Funding is distributed by an open call mechanism, and that's absolutely always managed just directly by VSS, and all groups themselves have delivery plans which are renewed annually and aligned to their own budget allocation. The plans themselves are then agreed with VSS, and delivery is monitored by VSS on a quarterly basis. So I think there's a fair degree of oversight in terms of how the funding is delivered to all those groups out there that are on the ground providing excellent services to support victims.
Nicola Brogan.
Can Corla agus Bruhish Lesh and Ira thank the Minister for her answer so far. Can the First Minister provide an update on the appointment of a new chair and board members of the VSS, please?
Thank you for that, and I can confirm my commitment that we want to get this done as quickly as possible. In terms of the appointment of a new chair and board members for the VSS, interviews for the posts concluded on the 11th of March. We received an unranked list of successful candidates at the end of March as per the Capani Code. And then in June we were issued a list of our preferred candidates to our officials, and candidates were informed by HR Connect that they've been successful. And then by the 8th of August all pre-employment checks were confirmed to have been completed, and we were provided with completed political activity forms and draft formal appointment letters for our signature. Again, that's a requirement by Capani. So I hope that the successful candidates will take up their posts without further delay, and that will ensure that VSS continues to do the great work that it does and has a full board and its court at all times. My commitment is to get this done as quickly as possible.
Paula Bradshaw.
Please. We are pleased to advise that the Deputy First Minister and I will shortly be meeting with the candidates who have been deemed appointable by the selection panel. The appointment of a new Commissioner is essential to inform the development of policies and to help ensure the longer-term needs of victims and survivors are represented by a strong, independent voice. As we have previously informed members, the appointment process is regulated by the Commissioner for Public Appointments, and as such it must comply with the Code of Practice for Ministerial Public Appointments.
Bradshaw.
Speaker, and thank you, First Minister. I suppose I asked the question in the context of the work of the Northern Ireland Office, UK Government at the minute around the replacement to the Legacy Act, and I just feel that this Commissioner and the people that he or she works with will have such a pivotal role in terms of what should be coming forward in terms of amendments to that. So I'm just wondering if there's any talk about that being specific to this role. Thank you.
No, I think we've got an opportunity, and as I said, we're at the end stage of the appointment process, and the Deputy First Minister and I will be interviewing in the coming weeks, and I think that allows us then to make a successful appointment and let that person get on with doing what they believe is right in terms of the needs of our victims and survivors community here. And I think that's really, really important. As the member is very aware in her role as committee chair, I mean, the role of the Commissioner is so vitally important, particularly in terms of advocacy, history and education, and also young people, and it's very much about improving the lives of victims and survivors, but it's also equally about making sure that the services that are in place at this moment in time are always fit for purpose. So there's a huge interest for the new appointee, but I look forward to us getting to the point where we're able to make that appointment as quickly as possible.
Jane.
I welcome that a public recruitment competition for a new Irish Language Commissioner has commenced. Would the First Minister agree with me that would be hugely welcome development among Gaeilgeoirí and the Irish language community in general, and represent another step forward in building a society underpinned by rights and respect for all?
Yes, to the member. Yes, I think it is a significant milestone, the fact that they are now out for appointment also. I think it's something that's very much appreciated by Gaeilgeoirí. There's no doubt the influence of the Irish language can be seen in every corner of life. Yesterday was a good example of that on St Patrick's Day. All the celebration right across every corner of society, community groups, media, arts, education, politics. It's very much a living language and very much everywhere is Teanga Beo and Gaeilge. But the Irish language does belong to us all, and for my part I want to continue to work hard to promote its development, but also to build on the real and tangible progress that we have made in our society. I can also confirm that, I'm very glad to confirm that the other competitions to recruit the Director and other members of the Office of Identity and Cultural Expression and the Commissioner for Ulster Scots and Ulster British Tradition are now launched as well. And each Commissioner will play a leading role in enhancing and protecting the language in our public services and everyday life. So I look forward to that coming to fruition as we seek to build a society that's underpinned by rights and respect for all. And I should just add, in the vein of commissioners, we've also launched the Commissioner for Older People, again something that was very much welcomed, and I know that members of the House would want to welcome that also as well.
Justin McGildy. First and Deputy First Minister, when previously asked about the appointment of a Commissioner for Victims and Survivors, we were told it would be early next year. Now that we're into the third month of the year, can you confirm that there will be an appointment before summer recess?
As I said in my initial answer, we are now at the process where we're able to move to the interview stage. So we're very close, we're very much at the end of the process, and I look forward to us getting the appointment over the line and getting it announced in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Question number 5.
The establishment of a memorial is the final outstanding recommendation of the Hart Report, and we remain committed to its implementation. Following our engagement with the 4 main victims and survivors groups, we are pleased to confirm that there is support for fulfilling this recommendation through a memorial plaque here in Parliament Buildings. We will be writing to the Speaker seeking approval to progress this and are grateful for his support to date. We also recognise that some survivors wish to see a broader programme, including localised memorials. Officials have spoken to local authorities, and we've also sought input from representative groups and those that are not associated or affiliated with any particular group. And once potential locations are confirmed, we're going to work with the Arts Council on ensuring that the views of victims and survivors are very much central to designing the memorial.
Mr. Dixon. Thank you very much, and thank you, First Minister, for your answer to the question. Minister, given that some of those groups, as you've said, are not happy or comfortable with the proposals, can you indicate to us just how your office will take into account the sensitivity and breadth of concerns expressed by victims and survivors? Minister.
I can assure you that we'll do everything that we can to make sure that their views are taken on board. These are people that have been failed at every turn over the years, and it's important that we get this right. And we've committed, both the Deputy First Minister and myself have met some of the groups, we've met individuals, and we want to continue to engage with them because their voice is absolutely crucial, and we must get this right in terms of this remaining part of this jigsaw in terms of the memorialisation. So I think we're making some strides forward in terms of the memorialisation in this building itself, but then there's that wider area where we're going to work with the Arts Council to look at what other form of memorial would be appropriate, because there are differences, as the member has recognised. Some feel like an education programme perhaps is the best way to go. Some feel that plaques are appropriate. Everybody will have a different view, but we must make sure we have a forum where everybody's view will be heard, and I can give you that assurance. That's the determination of the Deputy First Minister and myself.
Linda Dillon.
Cian Corley, and thank you, First Minister, for your answers, and I'm glad to hear that there is intention for a wider programme. Can you detail how the victims and survivors will be, how their voices, you will ensure how their voices will be heard and that they are engaged right throughout that widening of the programme?
Sure.
Yeah, so as I said, both the Deputy First Minister and myself have met with some of the groups because we do want them to know that they are being heard in our office, and that as we advance the memorialisation, that we're doing so in a way that is something that's going to be received well by themselves, and it makes a difference to themselves and their own experience. So we are going to ensure that their voices are heard. We're going to, as I said, we've made a progress here in this building, but in terms of next steps, officials are going to continue to engage directly with victims and survivors through the representative groups, but also through direct outreach to those that are not affiliated with any of the groups. But we also envisage that the additional element to all of that will be that the Arts Council itself will provide a structured forum for victims and survivor input. So therefore they get to help to shape what is the final memorial and what it might look like and what form it might take, what the wording may perhaps be. So they will be part and parcel of helping to shape memorials in a way that reflects their own personal experience and their own wishes. So I think that we would hope that that sort of broad approach will be the best way in which we can ensure that the widest possible range of voices are heard as we develop these plans further.
John Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 6.
Mr.
The Programme for Government 24 to 2027 acknowledges that we must work together across government and society to end the epidemic of violence, abuse and harm against women and girls. Our long-term focus is on early intervention and prevention. We've already made significant progress from the steps we committed to undertaking in the Programme for Government itself. We've launched the EVOG Change Fund, representing a £3.2 million investment for community and voluntary sector organisations, and also grassroots communities in partnership with local councils. We've also launched the Power to Change campaign with partners in Justice and the PSNI to challenge unacceptable attitudes and reduce harmful behaviours of men and boys. We've also established key sectoral working groups to improve outcomes for women and girls in education, workplace and social and nighttime settings. Through the SBRA Challenge Fund, we've invested in organisations to explore how to use technological innovation to improve understanding and prevention, and also to improve the safety of women and girls everywhere. So we're going to continue to work with executive colleagues to support delivery and communications, as well as advising on innovation and good practice.
Mr Buckley. Thank you, Speaker. I welcome the strategy which aims to protect women and young girls from violence. Today's society poses many real threats to women and young girls, including from those biological males who masquerade as females. So can I ask the First Minister, does she share my concerns, and indeed the concerns of many women in our community, and the common sense view that biological men should not be able to compete in female sport, and that female safe spaces, particularly female changing rooms, should never be accessible to biological males, no ifs or no buts?
Look, I'm not going down this route. What I will say is that our strategy, which you've asked me a question in relation to, is very much about ending violence against all women in society. It's not focused on perpetrators, it's focused on ending violence against women who receive or always receive an end of this violence. I'm not taking you up on going down a one-way street of trying to marginalise one section of the community over the other. I don't think that is helpful. I'm all about protection for women. I don't think there's anybody in this chamber that isn't.
Cathy Mason.
Can Corlia, and I thank the First Minister for her answers. Can the First Minister please provide an update on the End of Violence Against Women and Girls Change Fund?
Yeah, thank you to the member for the question. So I can confirm that the £3.2 million has been allocated to the Change Fund, and that comes under two different strands of work, both of which launched in January, and will assist both local groups and organisations, as well as 8 community and voluntary sector expert organisations in their work to end violence against women and girls. As part of the EVOG Local Change Fund, funding of £1.4 million has been allocated across councils, and that's going to make grants up to £25,000 available to community and voluntary sector organisations who are operating in a very local way, providing funding direct to grassroots community groups to build capacity and to allow them to take local action. And I can say to the member that I was actually just at a young women's group for International Women's Day, and I was actually quite surprised to learn how this funding is actually filtered right down into grassroots level. This is a small rural community group, Clonode Young Women's Group, and they themselves were part of bidding into the local council for a small pot of funding that allowed them to devise a device that actually helped the young women in the community feel safe. And I felt so proud that a strategy that we have agreed on this chamber actually was making a difference on the ground with young teenagers and young women and young men who were talking about, across society, talking about violence against women and girls. But these young women's group had actually devised something that was funded through this programme. To me, that's something at a very high level strategy working in action, and I was very proud of that piece of work and to see that happening. But across all of our councils, the applications are open until the end of this month, and delivery is going to be commencing from April 2025. And we've also announced the £1.2 million investment under the EVOG Regional Change Fund on the 21st of January, and that funding again is going to be available up until the end of March 2026, with support and partner with 8 community and voluntary sector expert organisations who are already leading the way right across the north in terms of preventing violence against women and girls. Additionally, we have provided £600,000 across the level local council areas.
Your time's up to answer this.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, there's lots of work happening on the ground, and I can see our strategy filtering right onto the ground, which is more important.
Cara Hunter.
thank the First Minister for her answer so far. First Minister, on page 33 of the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, it alludes to creating a technology challenge fund to address digital violence towards women and girls online. Can you detail today how or if the funding alluded to in the programme for government will contribute to this?
Yeah, as the member is acutely aware from her own personal experience, the online experience of so many women is absolutely horrific, to say the least. And that's why it is important that as part of our strategy we are looking at this very area. This is also a very evolving situation as new software and things come online and new ways in which to engage online. So I can say to the member that as part of our office's work, Ofcom actually briefed our junior ministers last week in terms of the work of Ofcom on terms of their regulatory framework, and also the passing of the Online Safety Act in 2023. Cases like your own, a number of high-profile recent cases, have really demonstrated why we need to get more active in this field, and we need to stay ahead of the technology, and we need to be advancing. So I think that's something that we all want to increasingly, I suppose, get ahead of as best as you can in this complicated world. But I think the increasing challenge lies in the fact that the online platforms and the way in which young people engage is something that's quite challenging. But we have, in the framework itself, we have built-in agility to actually lend ourselves to these problems as they arise, particularly in relation to expanding on how we're going to tackle ending online harm and technological abuse, including sexually explicit deepfake imagery as well.
Timothy Gallison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to Mr. Buckley's supplementary question and the non-answer that he got, what is the First Minister's take on a biological man beating up a woman in the boxing ring because he claims to be a woman?
First Minister.
Not related to the question, and I told you I'm not playing your game. I've told you this on every occasion you ask me, and every time you ask me the question, I'm going to give you the same answer.
Ms McAllister is not in her seat. Question 8 was withdrawn. I call William Irwin. Minister.
We are delighted to have appointed Siobhan Casey as Commissioner for Older People. Siobhan will be in post from the 7th of April 2025. We recognise that the role of the Commissioner as being vital in safeguarding and promoting the interests of older people here and ensuring that the welfare and rights of this sector are respected and protected, and also that their voice is heard. So we look forward to engaging with the new Commissioner as she sets her priorities for the year ahead, and also that she champions the rights and needs of older people.
Mr. Irwin.
Would the First Minister agree with me that rights of older people are very important, because many old people feel that decisions are being made without their consent, even though they have the capacity to make those decisions themselves?
Yeah, I think that's why it's important that we have our Commissioner now in place, and I think certainly the Deputy First Minister, I'm sure, would agree with me that when we interviewed Siobhan, has a real passion for being an advocate for older people. She's great depth of experience in her previous role, and I think that's really going to enhance her offering to our older population. The role of the Commissioner is quite wide in promoting an awareness of matters relating to and safeguarding of older people, challenging discrimination, promoting positive attitudes. And I can tell you that from my experience of the interview, the calibre of Siobhan coming forward is going to be somebody who is going to be energetic on behalf of older people out there in society.
Mr. Clark's not misplaced. I call Steve Egan.
The Executive Office has led an effective and coordinated local humanitarian response to support those arriving here following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. To date, we have welcomed even over 3,400 Ukrainian citizens under the visa routes established by Westminster. Our department has ensured appropriate safeguarding checks have been undertaken to allow arrivals to be welcomed in the homes of local sponsors, and indeed to ensure the sponsors themselves are supported. Each arrival has received a £200 immediate cash support payment, and eligible hosts have received monthly thank you payments. Over $689,000 has been paid in immediate support, and more than £5.1 million has been paid to more than 1,000 hosts. The department has also facilitated and coordinated support provided by other key departments, statutory bodies and voluntary and community sector organisations in vital areas such as health, education, benefits and immigration advice. Officials are also in regular contact with the Ukrainians and NI community group.
Dr. Aiken.
The Minister will be aware of the reason why we have so many Ukrainian refugees is because Russia is attacking them, and there's nearly daily air attacks. Could the Minister reflect on her remarks when she said she was incredulous that we were going to support the Ukrainians by giving them the opportunity to defend themselves? And does she not think that goes counter to actually what she said in the first place on her first question she was answering me about the Ukraine? How could it possibly be incredulous?
Well, I stand over my remarks. I'll repeat them for you again today. I think, look, there's no escaping the fact that Russia's invasion of Ukraine, what it's meant in terms of the devastation that's left behind, we all witness that every day and we all want it to come to an end. It's a flagrant breach of international law, but the best way to end these things is actually with diplomacy, to create a situation where we have a lasting peace. I think that's very, very important. I want to see genuine engagement, I want to see constructive dialogue, I want to see an end to the conflict. I want Ukrainian people to be living in their homeland happy and peaceful and prosperous. That's unfortunately not where we are today. So at a time whenever the world is in flux, at a time whenever we're looking at a re-armed Europe, at a time whenever today we're discussing welfare cuts to people who have disabilities, people who are sick, but the British government can't find money to support them, but they can find money to arm. I don't think that is the right approach for anybody to take.
Jill Guy.
We recognise the immense economic, historical and reconciliation potential of the site and are committed to working with the Maze Long Cash Board to maximise those opportunities for the benefit of all. The Board met with the TEO Permanent Secretary on the 27th of February 2025, and since that meeting we have received advice from officials on the options for the Board and also for the immediate priorities. That's currently under consideration in our office, but no decisions have been made yet in terms of the future of the site.
Mrs. Guy.
Thank you, First Minister, for the answer. Have you presented with options for the MLK Development Corporation on a way forward, and have these been considered, and what are the next steps with that?
Sure.
Yes, so just as I've said, we've just recently received some information, particularly in terms of those specific options, and we have to meet then with our Permanent Secretary to discuss these, but as I said, no decisions have been made at this moment in time, but this is something that we have to discuss because we have to, as I said, politically, or before in this chamber, what we need to see is a political agreement in terms of what I think is the enormous economic potential of the site. You know this, I know you agree with that. I think many others here agree with that. Also, I think it could be a game changer for our local economy, so I hope that we can get to the point where we have a political agreement, and I hope that we can get the site opened up in a way that will bring huge benefits to our local economy.
Mr. Brett's not in this place. Call down Armstrong.
And First Minister, can I ask you question 14? Thank you.
We're flying through them today. The Executive faced significant challenges setting a budget for 24-25, and the financial position remains very difficult due to the interim fiscal framework. We therefore have insufficient budget, and conversations are ongoing regarding this. As a consequence of this, the departments are all facing tough decisions to manage their budgets and to live within their funding allocations. This year we had to agree a 24-25 budget ahead of the programme for government to make sure that departments had the certainty needed to run public services. This enabled the department to plan ahead to deliver our joint priorities, and then over the last 12 months the Executive has delivered significant outcomes for workers, families and communities, including public sector pay, improvements in childcare provision, a strategy to end violence against women and girls, among much more. Equally, we know that there's an awful lot more still to be done across the remainder of this mandate, and we want to continue to build upon what we have been able to achieve for people in this first year. The draft budget itself was agreed on the 19th of December, and the consultation on this closed just last week on the 13th of March, and it's now for the Executive to agree its final budget and work together to develop and agree the detailed policies as we move to delivering the commitments which we've all signed up to in the programme for government.
That brings us to the topical questions for the First Minister, and I call Matthew O'Toole.
First Minister, was it right for you, the Deputy First Minister and others to create the expectation that people who lost power as a result of Storm Eowyn would receive compensation, given those hopes have now been dashed?
It was right for ourselves to make the good, strong and articulate case for why people needed to have compensation. Unfortunately, that is not how it has transpired. I think a lot of effort, as we said at the time, and a lot of credit needs to go to all of our agencies that responded in live play and at that time in terms of trying to support people and get them reconnected. But there's no doubt that people had their lives disrupted, and it's disappointing that Ofcom and Utility Regulator couldn't find their way to provide the compensation which we all articulated was absolutely needed.
Mr. O'Toole.
With respect, First Minister, you aren't, and nor is the Deputy First Minister, Advice NI. It's not your job simply to be articulate and to make cases. It's your job to lead. Whenever thousands of people heard you, the Deputy First Minister and the then Economy Minister say that compensation should be paid, that created an expectation. Those people have been let down. Would you perhaps reflect that in the future, perhaps governing takes more than simply warm words?
First Minister.
I will not apologise for standing up for people. I won't apologise for working hard on people's behalf. I believe that in terms of the storm response itself, I believe that every agency put its shoulder to the wheel. I think everybody got on the ground immediately to try to assist. I believe we give out the right warnings to try to get people ahead. But of course, we're going to make the case for people to have compensation. It was the right thing to do, and I'll do it again tomorrow if needs be. But let's work to ensure that where lessons are learned, and for future storm, which we know, just given climate, that is where we will unfortunately inevitably be. And we need to look at how we can best support people at times of crisis. I think that's what we all want to do.
First Minister, given the news that Israel has renewed their deadly air attacks on the people of Gaza, will the First Minister agree that this is an appalling breach of the ceasefire?
First Minister.
Yeah, I think that last night's airstrikes in Gaza were nothing short of a brutal and inhumane assault on people who are defenceless. These are people with nowhere to go. These are people with no roofs over their head. These are people with no food in front of them. Children are trapped in a nightmare with nowhere to run. And what we've seen over the course of the last 24, 48 hours are Israeli bombs raining down again on the people of Palestine. For the love of God, what and who could ever think that this is remotely acceptable? And it's a gross failure of leadership and utterly reprehensible that world leaders are standing by. World leaders, including in the United States, standing by and nearly in some ways cheerleading what Israel are doing in Palestine. So I think that what we've witnessed over the course of the recent day has been another act of genocide on the part of Israel, another act to murder and kill and maim the Palestinian people. And I again appeal to the international community for everybody to put their efforts to the fore again. It's now time to act. We need to see a resolution for everybody in the Middle East. We need to see a resolution which is a two-state solution and something that will give peace to both Palestinians and Israelis.
Thank you, First Minister. The Palestinian people in Gaza have endured horrendous slaughter at the hands of the Israeli occupation forces, in particular over the last year and a half. Would you agree that Israel needs to stop their attacks and respect the ceasefire?
Yes, I call on the Israeli government to reinstate and to respect the ceasefire that was achieved. But the international community, including Britain and in Dublin, need to ensure that all pressure is exerted to avert what is happening right now. Israel just can't be allowed to continue to breach international law and to annex the Palestinian people and to basically to attack them day and daily. It just can't continue. Where are the international community at this moment in time when the Palestinians need them?
Chambers.
The First Minister gave her initial assessment of the benefits of the visit to Washington last week by a large Northern Ireland delegation.
Well, as the member is aware, I didn't attend Washington last week, but I can tell you that for reasons that I've just referenced, because of the situation in Palestine, because of the stance of the US administration, and because I simply will not turn the other way when we see such a breach of international law and the genocide of the Palestinian people. And I'm telling you all, whenever everybody will reflect on this period in time, and there'll be those that decided to look away, and there are those that didn't, I would be proud to say I did not look away. But I believe we can make that principled position, but also work to promote our local economy, which I'm glad that we were able to do over the course of the recent week. It showcased ourselves as a great place to live, to work, to invest, to study, and we very much took that message when the Deputy First Minister and I led a Chamber of Commerce delegation when we went to mark the first anniversary of a Memorandum of Understanding with the North Carolina Chamber. And that itself was an opportunity for us to promote our vision for our economy, and also to say that we are such a fantastic place with such innovators and such world-leading businesses. And it was a sense of pride, actually, I think, for the Deputy First Minister and myself to lead such a strong delegation of local business people. And it gave us an opportunity to also extend an invite to the North Carolina Chamber and their political representatives to come here at some stage, hopefully this year also. That will allow us then again to further those relationships that we have built. And as you know, the Deputy First Minister then went on to Washington and carried out a whole programme of events, and again with those messages in terms of us being a great place for investment and a great place to, with great agility and a small community that actually can be very much the world leading in the fore of many, many areas.
Mr. Chambers.
Focusing on the economic benefits, would the Minister agree with me that her full attendance in Washington in her position as a First Minister for all would have added value to the visit?
I'm content with the decision that I made, as I'm sure the Deputy First Minister is also content with her own decision.
And can I thank the First Minister for the principled stance that she took in terms of the events that she didn't attend, but in terms of following on from the previous speaker, can the First Minister maybe outline in detail her recent trip to North Carolina?
Yeah, as I said, it was a real pleasure to visit North Carolina with the Chamber, and for us to have the opportunity to lead that delegation of local business leaders, where we had the chance to set out our stall to some of the world's leading businesses. We took this opportunity to showcase the strengths of our economy, and we do have a really, really good story to tell, and a very, very positive story to tell. An incredibly talented workforce. We made the case for why they should invest here at home. Some of the businesses that travelled on the delegation are world leading in innovation and the work that they do. So it was very much about attracting major investment. It was about creating those better jobs here. And it was about delivering exciting opportunities for people, because that's a priority which we've set out in our programme for government. So I think North Carolina was absolutely well worth doing, and I look forward to other international visits that align with what we're trying to do for our own local economy here.
Mr. McGuigan.
I asked the First Minister, will she continue working to promote the North as a vibrant place to live, work and invest in?
Yes, I am absolutely determined, as is the Deputy First Minister and our entire executive, I believe, to continue to promote our wares here, to sell what we have on that international front, because we have great people, we have a happy population, we have a talented workforce, we have a young strong cohort coming out of our universities. We just have a very skilled population base. So the story that we tell is a good story and something that resonates very well on that international stage. So I think when we look towards the future, growing our economy, we look towards what are our opportunities. We equally look towards what are our challenges, and tariffs is probably up there with those at this moment in time. But I think the enormous opportunity that we have ahead of us in terms of creating more jobs and bettering people's lives, because we have that unique access to both markets, both the European and the British markets, and we have a thriving all-island economy. So all those things puts us firmly on the map as a great place to live and to invest and to do business, and that's something that I am wholly committed to. So I hope that we can continue to keep working together to maximise all of this potential, and I have no doubt that we will do so.
Colin McGillivray.
First Minister, the British Government have just announced a series of cuts to welfare payments, particularly focused on disability payments, causing massive concern, rightly so, including for people who rely on those supports. Will the First Minister commit to raising this issue with the British Government?
Yeah, I haven't seen the full detail, but I know it's been announced, and I think, yes, absolutely, we have to raise this issue with the British Government. I'm sure the Department of Communities will likewise be wanting to raise these issues, because I think that this is yet again more of the same from this government in London, who are reaching constantly for those people who need our support more than others. These are people that have brought in the national insurance hike that's going to be so detrimental to our local businesses. These are people who have cut the winter fuel payment for pensioners, and now they're reaching for people with disabilities and those that are sick and vulnerable in our society. I mean, these are political choices being made in London that are impacting detrimentally on our lives here, and we don't have a say in that. So I think that targeting the most vulnerable in our society through these punitive taxes is clearly a political choice in London, but it does not serve the interests of our people here. But I can assure you that yes, we will take every opportunity to raise these issues with the relevant people in London.
Mr Gildernew.
Cormac, and does the First Minister also agree with me that the levels of funding supplied from the British Government to the Executive are simply not enough?
This was one of our day one priorities, and I think every party actually represented in the Chamber, I believe, party group, and certainly signed up to that being the case. And we have seen that they have recognised that we have been underfunded, but we're feeling the detriment and the impact of 14 years of Tory austerity, and now that's being continued as a political choice by this new British Government. And that's impacting our public services every day and our ability to deliver on health and education and transform and do all the things that we've said that we want to do. So we have to continue to make this case. We have to continue to build the case for why we need a proper funding model. We're not asking for special treatment, we're asking for what is appropriate. The people here pay taxes, they pay their national insurance, they deserve good public services. So we have to continue to make this case to the Treasury in London and ensure that our voice is heard. I think we can reflect on the fact that we have made some progress here, but I do think that we have certainly got a long way to go to ensure that we have proper funded public services for the people that we all represent.
Question 6 withdrawn. I call Nicola Brogan.
Concordia, it was great to see the First Minister speak and attend the Women in Business Awards last week. Does the First Minister agree that women are leading the way across our society?
Yes, it was a great initiative. Women in Business Awards is always such a positive event, celebrating all that is great, all the innovators right across the business community. And I have to commend the women in business themselves for the work that they do to support women, to ensure that they have the skills in which to step forward, whether that's to be an entrepreneur, a social economy, or even just to do better in the career that they're in. But when we look across society, we can reflect on so many positive changes that are evident in this chamber itself. The number of women in politics, I think, is something that's something that we can point to as progress. You look around the executive table, likewise, I think we can point to that as progress. And I see it every day in all the engagements. You can see women leading from the front in all areas, and in particular on this occasion it was about the celebration of women in business.
Ms Brogan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the First Minister recommit today to tackling issues facing women and girls in our society?
Yes, I can. You may have seen at the weekend, writing in the Irish Times, Justine McCarthy wrote, "Misogyny is killing women, but it is sexism that facilitates it." And I think that is a real wake-up call. Together, we have to break the cycle of violence and support those women and girls who refuse to be silenced. And all of us in this chamber have a role to play in doing that, in confronting, challenging them, or challenging where we see it, confronting and exposing it where we see it. This thing that's called casual, everyday sexism, there is nothing casual about it. That's why from day one this has been a priority for our executive, and our strategy tackles the root causes of this violence. Very much is all about prevention. And as I said, I think that's going to have a positive and lasting impact for our wider society here. But we'll do this whenever we work together. All of the parties of this chamber, working with our partners out there across society, we need to do everything that we can to break down barriers, to challenge the sexism where it occurs and the misogyny where it occurs. I'm certainly committed to that, and I know that members elected here are also up for that too.
Honour McMurray.
Thank you to the First Minister. The Executive Office report Ending Violence Against Women and Girls documents attitudes of 16-year-olds in Northern Ireland and the prevalence of adverse childhood experiences. What role does the First Minister feel that the Executive Office has in tackling all such adverse experiences?
First Minister.
I'm not sure if I picked up the question right, so if I didn't, given the time, if I didn't, I will write to you to confirm. But I think one of the beauties of our strategy itself is the fact that so many partners came together to devise the strategy itself, including those groups who work with young people. I think that's what you referred to, Andy. I'm sorry I didn't quite hear you properly. So I'll check the Hansard and I'll write to you. But I think you were asking about adverse incidents and how we can change that. The beauty of the strategy itself is that it's agile as well, so we can respond to issues as they arise. So if we pick up information that's not reflected in the strategy, we can adapt. And if that's not what you asked me, then I will write to you to confirm.
Time was lapsed. Questions to the First Minister. So we now move to the next item of business. If members just take their ease for a moment while we change the chair.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. The next item of business is the resumption of the debate on delivering an Irish language strategy. And the next person to speak is Doug Beattie, who's winding on the amendment. And Doug, you have up to 5 minutes.
Deputy Speaker, the Ulster Unionist Party believes that the Irish and Ulster Scots language and culture should be respected, promoted, funded and cherished. They are as much ours as they are anyone else's. I remember attending a Turis Awards event with Linda Irvine a while back and handing out awards to those who had achieved various levels of speaking the Irish language. It was a genuinely warm event. It felt inclusive. And for those who were receiving their awards who were not put off by my poor attempts at speaking Irish, really looked happy with their achievements. Yet this amendment is about promoting the Ulster Scots element to this motion, and I hope the Assembly can support it. It acknowledges, celebrates and advances the historical, cultural and social importance of Ulster Scots in Northern Ireland alongside Irish. Visiting an Ulster Scots Agency outreach programme near Londonderry, I heard about their rich cultural heritage, their music, their poetry and their film. Stories from the Loan, a series of 6 short educational films for kids to learn the language. The Forged in Ulster series of films, as varied as they were informative. Because Ulster Scots is really key to what happens globally. Forged from Ulster series showed how Ulster Scots shaped the most powerful country in the world, the United States of America. No fewer than 20 US presidents have an Ulster Scots heritage. It was an Ulster Scot, John Dunlap from Strabane, who printed the first US Declaration of Independence, and an Ulster Scot, Charles Thompson from Maghera, who helped design the US Great Seal. And of course, we cannot forget the elite US 75th Ranger Regiment, who was formed from Rogers Rangers, the leader being Robert Rogers, the son of Ulster Scots settlers. His standing orders are still used today by that regiment. In music, Ulster Scots has a major influence on country and folk music, as well as bluegrass music. It's music that tells a story, with use of Highland and Lowland pipes, fiddles and drums. Rhythmic poetry defines Ulster Scots, as we have names such as Samuel Thompson, Francis Boyle and Sarah Leach, and their poetry. And this includes James Orr, an Ulster Scots poet, a Presbyterian from County Antrim, and one of the United Irishmen involved in the 1798 Rising. He wrote in a similar vein to Robbie Burns about rural life, and in vivid terms. It's intriguing how we have much crossover in culture and language here in Northern Ireland and across the whole island of Ireland. One of the reasons why I believe this amendment to be appropriate and necessary to put into context the cultural and diverse melting pot we all belong to, in part or in whole. It's a living expression of who we are, where we have come from, and how we understand ourselves and each other. In recent years, we have seen a remarkable resurgence of interest in Irish and Ulster Scots, particularly amongst young people. As we commend the Irish language sector, and we should, it's important that we equally commend the Ulster Scots Agency for its tireless work in promoting and developing the use of Ulster Scots. Their hard work has ensured that Ulster Scots continues to thrive as an important part of Northern Ireland's shared cultural heritage. The Ulster Scots sector is not as developed as the Irish language sector, but with support and recognition, we can help those who work hard to develop it. An Irish language strategy is important, and so is an Ulster Scots strategy. Neither need be mutually exclusive. Neither should feel the other one is taken away from them, but instead feel complementary in what they are trying to achieve. And I hope you can all support this amendment today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Doug. I call on Colm Gildernew, and Colm, you have up to 10 minutes.
Last can Corlia and Boy has to call Legactana. A Glock part in Yisparakt and La New. I want to start off by thanking everyone who took part in the debate today, especially those members who indicated support for our motion. As a proud Gael, it brings me great joy to speak and to speak up for our native language here in this chamber, and to speak up for the thousands of native Irish speakers whose dedication and hard work has kept our language alive and allowed it to thrive. This motion is being brought to acknowledge the vibrancy, colour, strength and dynamism of the Irish language at this time as we bring Seachtain na Gaeilge to a close. I want to also acknowledge the event hosted by Speaker Poots in the Seanad as part of Seachtain na Gaeilge, which very much underlined the importance and long-standing history of the language and indeed how it unites us across the north into Scotland and beyond as part of a rich shared history. I want to say thank you to all those activists who put so much of their time and energy into promoting and protecting our language. The Irish language, Acharja, is experiencing a significant revival in the north. More and more people are taking an interest in learning the language, particularly young people. The Irish language is more visible today than it has been for many, many years. Irish language signage is readily available in many of our council areas, and I want to welcome the progress made by my party colleague Liz Kimmins in developing a pilot scheme to have dual language signage in the Gaeltacht quarter of West Belfast. Yep.
I thank my colleague for giving way, and I wonder would my colleague agree that countries all over the world have multilingual signs and they haven't collapsed into chaos, and perhaps the Minister should be more focused on delivering for all communities here instead of some imaginary linguistic bogeyman.
Absolutely agree that we need to ensure all communities feel welcome, supported and appropriately developed. And that point was made forcefully at Communities Committee on Thursday when it was pointed out that some people belong to several different communities and have needs that the Communities Department are responsible for, and we need to see intersecting and progressive progress on these issues. So, yeah, go ahead.
I listened to what the member said about dual language street signs, but does he not acknowledge that where residents in a survey have indicated that they do not want a dual language street sign, that should not be imposed against their majority wishes and also against the wishes of unionist representatives? That is actually only, if there was a forced through by nationalist representatives, that is increasing the perception of politicisation of the language.
So, just to say, Irish language is already on signs all throughout Belfast. Belfairstya and Shankill, these are all Irish words. They threaten no one and they should be embraced in the same way that they were embraced in this chamber throughout the week. I would also ask all parties in this chamber to condemn those vandalising and attacking dual language signs right across the north. I'd also like Lascan Corlia to place on record my appreciation for the current Marana Half Biochana exhibition at the Public Records Office, which is celebrating the women that revised the use of the Irish language in the late 1960s and early 70s, setting up the first urban Gaeltacht and Gaelscoil, and indeed to commend those young women from College de Firsta who helped put this important exhibition together. The growth and strength of the language is organic and grassroots led. Many new Irish language schools are being established, which is a sign that the demand for Irish is very much growing. These schools will also be instrumental in increasing access to Irish medium education across the north. We must also recognise the very important role our political institutions and legislation can play in encouraging the growth of the language and ensuring the speakers of the language are treated equally with other languages. As other members have pointed out, we have made some huge progress in recent times. The Identity and Language Act in 22 was a notable milestone for those of us who wish to see full equality for the Irish language. The outworkings of that Act recently allowed for the ban on the use of Irish in our courts to be repealed. The ban was another reminder of the horrendous persecution that Irish speakers suffered in generations past, and the righting of this historic wrong has been long overdue. The Act also set the stage for the appointment of an Irish Language Commissioner, and we heard last week the appointment process has now begun. It's important also, Chiarja, to recognise the advances that the language has made in film and music. Artists like Kneecap are bringing the Irish language into the mainstream in a way we've never seen before through their music and their award-winning film. I also want to recognise the progress made within this chamber in terms of accommodating the Irish language, and I want to thank the translation team for providing an excellent translation service. We've certainly come a long way since the days when the Irish language was openly mocked by members of the party opposite. But we must also recognise that there are significant challenges still to be overcome, and understand that there's a huge amount of frustration at the lack of progress amongst those activists in the Irish language sector. An Irish language strategy was agreed by all parties in the St Andrews Agreement in 2007. 18 years have now passed and we still don't have the strategy in place, despite the fact there have been 2 successful judicial reviews. Last week, Conor na Gaeilge presented to the Communities Committee in what was a very powerful session. Regrettably, the Minister has refused to meet with Conor on 3 separate occasions, despite them being integral to the work of the co-design group. And Minister, in relation to the comments you made earlier, I have seen the letters where Conor wrote asking you, making it clear they wanted to speak to you about the strategy as well as funding issues, and also your reply making it very clear that you do not intend to meet with them. And I think that's a mistake. And I think, given that you are a member for communities, all communities, you should do that. That position, Minister, leads to a widely held view that you don't respect the Irish language or those people who cherish, speak and use it every day. I also would be very curious and keen to find out more about what you referenced earlier in terms of reappointing the departmental groups. I'm not aware of any precedent for that. I'm not sure what the purpose. So, Deputy Speaker, I would be keen to understand what precedent, what the purpose of such a reappointment is, and how that will not simply be a further delay. Yeah, I give way.
Further delay. In fact, what it will be is asking departments to reaffirm that the members that they have put forward are still the correct members, and importantly, wanting to make progress, ensuring that the members that are appointed actually have the authority on behalf of their departments to make the necessary decisions.
And through the Chair, in light of that, what I then would like to know is what are the timelines and the deadlines for that process to take place to ensure that it doesn't act as a further delay. So I'd be keen to hear all that, but just to say, to underline, the Minister has a responsibility to demonstrate his respect as Minister for the Irish language and those who use it or wish to learn it, and to set out a clear timeline for when he will present a final draft strategy to the Executive.
Way. All right. Appreciate the member giving way, and I have said from the outset that I fully respect the rights of others to engage in different languages, whether that be Irish or Ulster Scots, and I will continue to do that and continue to make progress. I would remind the member that having been in the office a year, he is throwing considerable criticism my way for the strategy having not yet been delivered. I note that there has been no criticism from him for the Sinn Féin members of his assembly group that held the ministerial portfolio from 2020 to 2022, longer than I have been in post, and they did not make any progress on these strategies. That might be something that he wants to take into consideration as well. And since he avoided the question that was asked by Mr Kingston, can the member tell us, does he agree that the views of a minority should be able to override the views of a majority in local areas? Because I think that when we're talking about respect for each other, it would be good for Sinn Féin to come clear and tell us what they actually believe on that.
I don't believe that the visibility of Irish language represents a threat to anyone. I have to say that that's the case. My colleagues, in relation to all of the strategies, and there are a series of strategies which urgently need to be progressed, they're interlinked and interdependent. My colleagues were involved in setting up significant co-design processes and getting groups involved. Those groups are now telling us that they feel they have been cast aside and have no input into the process at this stage, at a time when we don't have clear timelines for delivery. Gormley, I'll get last young for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the question is that the amendment standing in the names of Robbie Butler, Doug Beattie, John Stewart and Colin Crawford be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any contraries? As I hear ayes from all sides of the House and only one no from Mr Gaston, therefore I say that the amendment is thereby passed. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. So therefore the question that the motion is amended be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any contraries? No. Noted. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Thank you very much indeed. Take your ease while we move on to the next item of business, which is the amendment.